Hey everybody, it's a Friday, October the 11th, 2024, and this is How to Restart a Church, a spin-off podcast about how to make church happen and how to make church happen again. I'm Pastor Trey Comstock. With me as ever is my friend and colleague, Pastor Emily Larson, and today we are going to talk about worship, or specifically, what is wrong with worship? Or more specifically, like, what's next? Like, where is this going? And so what prompted this discussion is a conversations that we have been having in the office for months, maybe years now. But more specifically is an article that kind of blew up in my weird corner of Christian internet from the Texas A&M University student paper, The Battalion. It is an opinion article entitled you don't like Breakaway, you just like the music. Is supplemental practice enough for salvation? By Joshua Abraham. To roughly clue you into this, I am friends with a lot of pastors who are also A&M alumni, and so I got a message like, have you seen the article in The Battalion? And I'm like, no. Yes, I was raised in that weird cult, but I never went to the university, and so no, I don't read the student newspaper, I'm sorry. So then I got sent this article, and the gist of it is that, so Breakaway is this very large regular Christian gathering on the A&M campus that specifically meets in Reed Arena, which is the basketball stadium. And it bills itself as a Bible study where you break away from the world and focus on Jesus. You can tell I'm about to undercut it because I use my stoner voice. And what Joshua Abraham of the Battalion gets at is like, look, you are showing up and having this hyper emotional experience to this super high production quality rock concert music Christian thing, but it just looks like a normal concert. So it's like same production values at this point, like the merch sold at, the front. And then the thing that really grabs Joshua, who is a Christian, just clearly a different stripe of Christian than the folks leading Breakaway, is when the teaching component comes, no one's paying attention.
Right.
No one's paying attention. They're like talking. A basketball stadium's a weird venue for a Bible study. But like, no one's paying attention. They're on their phones. They're talking. They're watching TikTok. It just looks like any other down moment. That the real intensity comes from this high production value Christian rock concert that is happening. He kind of my favorite paragraph, and it's not just because of the words yassify Jesus, but it's not because of the phrase yassify Jesus, is worship should be an act of obedience towards God. You should come to Breakaway for exactly that, not for some notion of a yassified Jesus concert. I might be wrong. I'm not the head of Breakaway, nor am I a pastor. But is Jesus the main directive here, not an aesthetic? I think that, right? And I have a lot of context, you and I both do, for contemporary worship, and I'm going to stop using that term because it's not helpful, because we've been doing it this way for 30 years.
So it's no longer actually contemporary.
Right. It's just and also, by the way, most of the largest churches in this country now worship in that style. And so it's now also not, I've said, I think on this show before, that we both won and lost the worship wars. We won the worship wars, and that style of worship was allowed to continue. In fact, it is now the main, it is more people worship that way than quote unquote traditional worship, which by the way was only really crystallized in its current form in the 1950s. None of this has anything to do with, chanting. Anyways, I digress. So we have a lot of context for this.
Yeah, because what was what was contemporary for us, when I visit a church's contemporary service, I will hear songs that I have heard since the 6th grade.
Right.
I just had my 39th birthday. Like,
yeah, exactly.
It is no longer contemporary.
Like I first encountered that style of worship when I was like 13. And
right.
so, and was like really involved in the scene of it by the time I was 15.
Right.
And so I grew up around these concerts. It was the first concert scene I was ever a part of. Because like I was in a band and we were learning the other bands and like we were part of like a community, and like this is how I learned to get involved in church work because no one else knew how to run the sound system. Neither did I, but I taught myself. And so like it really like I end up with the like skill set I have for my job today because of that scene. And at the time, one of the criticisms leveled at us by old people, probably people in their 40s, but they sure felt old to me, was, hey, this is just a concert. And we either said, no, or we said the more nuanced version of like, maybe it is, but what does it matter?
Right.
We are communicating Jesus content in another way. Like,
right.
Come at me, bro. Like, yeah, no, I get it. Like, there's a laser light show and a killer amp stack. And, you know, we all have dumb haircuts and tight t-shirts. Yeah, man, we do. My t-shirt says Jesus. But in the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup font. That was my favorite one. And so, in some ways, it's really interesting hearing that argument written back about this experience now 25 years later by someone who wasn't even alive when people who are probably like this dude's grandparents at this point were saying that to us.
Yes.
Maybe his parents' generation or like his older uncle's generation, right? Like it is really interesting to me to hear the full cycle of it. But also, I feel different about all of that stuff 25 years later than I did at the time. And I certainly feel different about the modern version of it, the current version of concert. We'll call it concert Christianity. Is that
the Jesus concert?
The Jesus concert, right? The yassified Jesus concert.
Yes.
Then I feel differently about it now than I did then. And I don't fully know if it's just like I have changed over 25 years or if something has happened in that scene in 25 years. But I read this, and 25 years ago, I would have said, whatever, man. We didn't have the phrase, okay, boomer at the time, but I would have just gone, okay, boomer, whatever. And now I go, yeah, we should unpack what's going on here.
Yes.
Because it's clearly the reason we went about, and I was very small, very, very small, but like I was a part of this scene, arguing for contemporary worship,
right?
Working on working to like run a band so that my church would have contemporary worship, like all these things, right? Like, it was in this scene. Like, why we did this 25 years ago was so that people would engage fully with it.
Yes.
But it wouldn't. We did want the music we responded to, but we did not. I certainly did not want it to be a concert. The sermon, the like teaching portion, the contents of the lyrics, all of it, theoretically wanted to come together so that people who would not people who like me, who find traditional worship utterly boring, still do. 25 years later, still boring to me, would have this other onboarding point.
Well, and this is the entire plot of Sister Act, right?
Yeah.
This is change the music and the young kids will come.
We did that. There was, so went back to my home church, complicated feelings about that place right now, but like went back to my home church because my son was in their summer children's play. And there was a bit where someone rapped on stage as part of this children's play. And I leaned over to my friend Patrick Frith, who we grew up together. I was like, Patrick, I think you and I were some of the first people to ever rap in this sanctuary, because we did the Joyful Joyful from Sister Act 2.
Nice.
Which is, just a, I know what it's riffing on, but like we did that, and Patrick and I were the rappers.
But it does make sense to change your worship style to fit your context.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's what we are, I don't think that's what the author of this article was trying to say was, don't do this. It was, are you actually creating authentic worship if you're just there for the emotional high of the Jesus concert, right?
Well, I think I've thought a lot about, like, why does this article resonate with me? And I think one of the pieces is I have never been able to shake from my head some of the arguments from the militant atheists circa 2004, 2005. And the two arguments that they make that always draw blood for me in my mind is, one, is religion just humans' love of pattern recognition? And this is how I end up like utterly traumatized and unable to see Jesus in my breakfast cereal, because I am always self-interrogating of, is this real, or am I just seeing a pattern because that's what the human brain does?
Right.
So that's one of their arguments that has always drawn blood from me, because I look at that and go, I listen to some of what we say, and I get a friend of mine had a friend of theirs declared themselves a prophetess, and I read what she's saying. I'm just like, oh God, this religion is in bad shape. We are just, oh my God, okay. These are just 4 random numbers and a weird press clipping. No, this is not the end times. Chill out. No. So there's that one. And the other one is this just groupthink? Is this just the emotional response of groupthink? And that is where I struggle with the current version of Yassified Jesus concert. Because I went a couple of years back now, I went to a Green Day concert, secular band, but the one that I have a lot of attachment to growing up, and still, like, I listen to their new music every once in a while. And, American Idiot comes out when I'm like junior or senior in high school. It was like the one CD that was in, I didn't have a lot of CDs. And so it was like the one CD that lived in my car CD player forever. And so I listened to that album, hundreds of times, right? And so like when they're doing the like opening guitar riff of Boulevard of Broken Dreams, at a giant outdoor venue full of people my age or yours or slightly older than you. You're back to being older than me, and boy, am I happy about that. Like, I felt something, right? Like, I had an emotional, because like I'm in a moment with these people that like I share at least a connection with, and like we have a connection with that music, and I'm feeling something. And what I hear in Abraham's article, Joshua Abraham's article, is this just like emotional response groupthink? Because as soon as that part's over, you just settle back in to like life is normal. And yeah, I think that is that, like, how do we like balance the, like, corporate worship is in some ways about a collective group experience, but that we're not just being in this like hyper emotional thing that then we feel something and then nothing else happens. Right.
There is a Wesley Foundation, so the United Methodist version of college ministry, we call them Wesley Foundations, near here, that has that hyper emotional, that expects that hyper emotional experience. And I had someone describing their most recent worship experiences to me, and they're like, I had to quit going because every time I would go, people would ask me why I wasn't crying, why I wasn't on my knees, why I wasn't raising my hands, wasn't I feeling what they were feeling? And I am not feeling what they are feeling. And they told me I was wrong. Like, they told me that I didn't feel the Holy Spirit, or that I wasn't a real Christian because I didn't feel things the way that they felt. And I was like, no. that's spiritual abuse.
That's spiritual abuse.
Don't listen to that. Like,
Yeah.
that's not true, friends. Let's stop making that story popular because it's not true, right? And you describe being broken up with over 6 months for not creating that hyper emotional experience.
Yeah, so
and that emotional abuse.
I think
in a previous church experience.
And I think you raise an interesting point of like, and maybe that is the experience that really changed something for me, because the thing, like what we were doing at Grace after the narcissist left and was not all that different, right? It was largely the same band. It was certainly the same style of music. Right. It was still, very contemporary, and in my case, kind of stand-up comedy informed preaching. And we got a lot of, man, it just doesn't feel the same. I just feel like the Holy Spirit left the building. And I'm like, that's not a thing we believe.
No.
And so
you don't have that power, by the way, to force the Holy Spirit out of the building.
Just there. It's just and it was really eye-opening. It was really psychologically destructive for me, but it was also really eye-opening of like, are people just into being manipulated?
Yes.
Like, is that what's become of my beloved contemporary, Jesus concert? Yes. Is that where we've landed is, I want someone who's going to pull semi-abusively on the big emotional levers so that I have these big emotional experiences, and that's what I think God is.
Right.
And that's concerning.
It is very concerning. And as people who have created worship services for a very, very long time,
25 years.
With the goal of creating authentic connection with God, right? Like, that is the goal of a worship experience. It's, when you're planning the music or the liturgy or whatever style you have, the goal is to create opportunities for deeper connection with God, right? And we've even planned those emotional ones, right? Like, we've had very emotional ones. We did one in a basement, right? That's one that comes to, and we intentionally pulled on empathetic emotional heartstrings because we wanted to evoke emotion. We wanted people to feel empathy for the persecuted church, right? It was very, very calculated. It was very much what we wanted to happen. But was that manipulative? And so I look at that and go, but
so it's all a matter of degrees. The only difference between like therapists, teachers, pastors, con men, narcissists, cult leaders, dictators, right? Like all those people, all of those people that I just named are in the business of behavior change.
Yes.
We're all in the business of behavior change. Pastors, teachers, therapists, cult leaders, dictators, they all, con men, they all want you to change your behavior.
Right.
And there are only so many levers in the human brain. Right. There are only so many levers. God only built you with so many brain chemicals and so many receptors for said chemicals.
Yes.
And so, it's not that we are pulling on different levers. There are only X number of levers, and we are all pulling on them. There is a matter of degree to which you are willing to pull on them.
Yes.
There is a matter of motivation as to why are you pulling on them. Are you pulling on them so that people will form an emotional connection with the persecuted people who are out there in the world and maybe understand a piece of their plight and not remain so insulated in your own comfort to break out of your comfort zone? Or are you doing it to create a sex cult?
Right.
Because those levers are the same levers.
Yes, they are.
Right. This is just we cannot sit here and moralize of I would never pull those levers.
Right.
There are not that many levers, y'all.
Right.
We all pull on them. When, as a teacher, right? I would try to have my students empathize with my plight as their teacher. And so I would bring a level of them hey, when y'all act like, there was a student teacher for students with emotional disabilities, and so their behavior was often a discussion. And a lot of what I was doing is trying to help them not just learn math, but like how to behave in the world and how to process their emotions. And so like we would have to get the emotional content into it. And so I'd be like, hey, when y'all behave like that, it makes me feel this.
Right.
And so
it's a
not
therapy
just
type
intellectually.
Right.
But that is the same lever.
Yes.
As people who make sex cults.
Yes.
It's just motivation and matter of degrees.
Right. And who your audience is.
Right.
Is it a congregation full of people? Is it a classroom full of young, impressionable students? Is it, and it's generally people who are there willingly. And that's also not to say that everybody 100% at Breakaway is on their phone and not paying attention and not connecting completely with the Holy Spirit either. If that is your jam, go for it. But evaluate whether or not you are seeking genuine connection or seeking the Jesus concert, I think, is what Joshua Abraham is getting at.
The other piece on a theological side is, in the end, our religion is not about a feeling, it's about an action.
Yes.
Like, it is not that the disciples never felt anything.
Right.
And it's not even on Pentecost. That it's not like they didn't feel anything.
Mm-hmm.
But there was, and so I don't want, again, I'm not trying to rob this of emotion, even as I am not, it's not that
it is emotional. It should be emotional.
Right.
However,
but
that should accompany the action of it.
The end, our faith is in action.
Yes.
It is a melding of you have this connection with God that is a meaningful and emotional connection, right? Yes. I am, I also am utterly disconnected from the exact opposite of the Jesus concert, which is most modern traditional worship. And I just find it so boring. So utterly boring. I cannot, I grew up, before I started preaching every Sunday, I had 27 years of essentially uninterrupted church attendance.
Mm-hmm.
Ask me how many sermons I remember from that time. It's none. Ask me how many meaningful, in Sunday worship experiences I had. Handful over 27 years.
Mm-hmm.
Utterly disconnected. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, that didn't work. That didn't work for me either.
Yeah.
And I have a little more attachment to the liturgy now post seminary, simply because I know we've been saying some of these words for a really long time, and I find that really cool. But no one taught me that in church. I had to go to seminary to find that out. So well done, church. If I found it, taking whatever Christian liturgy and learning oh yeah, parts of this communion liturgy go all the way back to the beginning. The Apostles' Creed is literally from the early church at Rome. And I'm oh my God, that's amazing. Why did no one tell me that in church? Church should have told me that. We did this all the time. I've been saying this
for years and I never knew,
Could
right?
we have introduced the Apostles' Creed with a sentence explaining why we do this? No one did. And then when I teach on it and I tell people that oh my God, I didn't know that. I'm you're 82. You've been in church this whole time. Why do you not know that? It's not your fault that you don't know that. Why did no one teach you that in a way that sunk in? Anyways, so not that. But also not the just pull so hard on the emotional hammer that emotional lever that people just erupt in catharsis.
Right.
And then walk away.
And then tune out.
And then tune out.
And then tune out because the Jesus concert's done.
The emotional catharsis is the whole religion, which is certainly what we ran into in the early days of Grace was I'm not having an emotional catharsis every Sunday. No, that didn't know that was the point. You think that, we got a problem.
Right.
Because that's not that is certainly not my view of worship. It's not that you should never have an emotional catharsis, clearly. But that's just you show up, you have this emotional catharsis, which then comes with like adrenaline and endorphins, and so that's what you're feeling.
Right.
And then
Adrenaline,
like,
endorphins, and an altar call.
Right.
Right.
And so this must be God. And I'm like, this could be God, or you're essentially like high. You have you have Christian runners high.
Serotonin high right now.
You are high right now. Cool.
Yes.
But like, you have just like, you have found a different way to go to a rave circa 1995. And yeah, you're doing it on like someone like jamming on your catharsis lever so hard your brain broke. But you are high right now. I get that you didn't pop a bunch of Molly before you went in, but you are still high right now.
Right. In the article, he says it's the same as going to Northgate, but without the alcohol. Right? Like it's the same thing.
But it's just, we've just found a sub for the alcohol, which is you are still like short-circuiting, overwhelming your brain's connectors, which is all being high is.
Yes.
Is you've introduced some sort of substance into your brain, artificially introduced, that overwhelms its receptors, and you go, oh man, dude, or however you react, I don't know.
Right. Well, and in particular with modern worship songs, some of them are fine, some of them are great, the lyrics are, theologically sound. Some of them not so much. Some of them really, really bad. Like if really, really the lyrics are the only thing that you're getting, and that's the only message that you're getting from church too, because you're tuning out for the rest of it, you are not getting good theology, friends.
Well, and a lot of them are just like, it's me and you, God, isn't it great?
Right.
That's all. Let's trust me. Like, as you start to like try to plan things with content, you go, okay, so we can do it's me and you, God, and you've got me, and you're going to support me, and aren't you great, and you saved me. Find we've talked about this before, but like find a Christian worship song that's about serving others.
Right.
Other than build your kingdom here doesn't count.
I would say building your kingdom here, right? Build your kingdom here. Mm-hmm.
And it's not end of list, but sometimes it feels like end of list. And by the way, that song's 12 years old. Right. So
you're a good father. It's who you are, and this is who I am. Right? It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who I am.
Well, you just ripped off an old one that was about the same thing.
Yep.
Right. Like,
this is my story. This is my song. Right. This is a lot of them are just, this is my story.
And so you're missing this whole other piece. And some of this, in talking the other way, when I am talking to preachers, I am a large advocate of, hey, maybe don't be the most boring 15 minutes of anybody's week. Right. Maybe engage people. Maybe don't, I think about a lot of preaching that I grew up with that was just like golf joke, biblical reflection that was obvious, not that emotional in a story, pleasant presentation, thank God it's over. Yeah. Right? Like we're talking about like the divine creator of the universe. We're talking about the story of salvation. Like again, like whereas
why can't we make this interesting?
I don't want you just jamming on the catharsis lever so hard that your entire audience breaks their brain, but also do not zap all emotion out of your communicating the good news.
Right. Maybe it should be good. Maybe it should actually be good.
Maybe it should be good. But I also think about some of my more recent, I haven't gone to a lot because frankly, my most recent 2 experiences with Jesus concerts. So you and I, it was like 6 years ago now, 5-6 years ago, we went to a once in a generation opportunity at Texas Motor Speedway.
Once in a generation opportunity
where we were freezing our butts off camping at a NASCAR track and getting preached to by some people who would eventually have to step down from their church because of incorrectly handling sexual abuse. And my pillow guy.
And the My Pillow guy.
Orthodox Church. It was a really weird, but like
it's a strange combo.
It was a strange combo. It was a crash course in preachers and sneakers.
Yes.
And it really, like, I remember very little was said other than they really wanted me to text my contact information to 75309 or whatever it was. That it just felt by the numbers and designed to, in that case, capture my contact information.
Yeah.
That I was supposed to have like a really overwhelming emotional experience. And then I was supposed to text them about my really overwhelming emotional experience so that then I could join their once in a generation movement that I've never heard of again.
Right.
And then we went to another one kind of shortly after it was like 2021, like shortly after the like pandemic stuff opened back up. And this one was much more a by the numbers thing that I've been going to since the early 2000s, complete with altar call, the leader of the most important band saying some minorly weird things into a microphone, and the invitation to adopt a World Vision kid. And it got to the point where, so at the end of the Matrix trilogy, you see inside Neo's head, and he no longer sees like the world, he just sees the code.
Right.
And it was like, oh my God,
we can just see the code
I can
now.
just see the code. All I see are the moves. I know what's going to happen next. If Agent Smith shot at me now, I could dodge it because I see it coming. It's going to be the World Vision kid now. And I was like, and I get that the World Vision pitch really doesn't change. It kind of pitches itself, but I think I could have delivered the World Vision pitch. And I'm not even arguing against World Vision kids, by the way. That's not the point. The point was that every concert I went to growing up had that. And 20 years later, I'm like, and now it's going to be I feel the energy dipping. It's time for the World Vision kid. And you know what? That's
what happened.
And now we're going to altar call. And they did. And it just felt so by the numbers, which I also understand is it not a uniquely me problem, but is a me problem when you've been leading worship for 25 years. Yeah, I go to like when we have to go to like Methodist conferences or whatever, I have the same problem. I'm just like, that's the opposite, where I can just like, the other thing in the Matrix is where the people can like look at the screen and then just like they know what they just see the like, oh, that's the lady in the red dress. This is like I can look at the bulletin and I can tell you everything that's not just like because the bulletin lists out like I can tell you the emotional weight and most of the words that will be said, even in the sermon that I haven't heard yet. And that's
when you listen to enough of these things and plan enough of these things, you start to recognize the man behind the curtain, right? That's doing the emotional lever pulling.
Or not, or failing to, but
failing to. Yeah, we've been to those two. So it's interesting.
And so all of this raises like a really profound question to me, because I'm at a place where almost no current existing kind of worship reliably connects me to a spiritual experience.
Right.
Because I'm either sitting there seeing the code, or I don't even need to attend the service. I can just read the bulletin and I can tell you everything that's going to happen. But also because both forms feel so calcified and either lacking emotion or overly manipulative at this point.
Yeah. Well, and when we talk to Gen Z, when we talk to the Shans, when we talked to Ellen from Love UMC, right? Those conversations that we have, when people say, well, then what style of worship, what should you do in worship? It's no. It's not about a style. Be authentic.
Yeah.
Maybe be real.
Well,
right. Whatever your real is, be that.
And that's what I hear in Joshua as well. Joshua Abraham's piece is, he's like, shouldn't this be about coming together to have our lives shaped by God? To which I would said, have you read John Wesley circa 1760? You and him, like I can imagine, and this goes back to this week's scripture show too, this week's Goodness of God, of like, this is what Wesley's saying it for a different reason of just like, this is, Wesley is having the same struggle that I have with most traditional worship. Like, this has become lifeless, y'all.
Yeah.
But also, like, it is not in its lifelessness. The Church of England circa 1760 was not shaping people's lives. Right. And John Wesley's like, this should be about shaping people's lives. And Joshua Abraham, 350 years later, is looking at like really high production contemporary worship done to like a budget sent to essentially unlimited, and going, where's the bit about this shaping our lives? And I go, yeah, man, I think that's why I started podcasting.
For sure.
Right? because I don't have this answer, right? Like, I have preached 400 sermons at this point, and I'm also at a point where I hate almost every worship service, even the ones I do. Like, I'm in a real place with all, like, most of the worship I see. And it used to just be traditional worship. I was just like, I got to college and I'm like, the Wesley Foundation was like using the hymnal. And I'm like, what is wrong with you? Like, we are a bunch of like late teens, early 20s, and we're gathering on a Sunday night to sing from the hymnal. Like, you are so square. You don't even know, man. And so, whatever. But like 25 years, 15, 18 years later from that, like, I'm just in a place where that's just, that feels calcified and manipulative and doesn't, when I am in those spaces, I don't feel myself being, in having an authentic encounter with God either. And so I wonder, where are we headed that is authentic for this generation or these generations in this moment? What is the actual once in a generation, movement of God?
Movement, right?
Text 73509. Text your thoughts to 7.
No, don't do that. But yes,
no, please don't. Please do not send me your contact information.
Right.
I will only misuse it.
But this is because the other side of that is the non-traditional side, is the Contemporvent side, right? If you haven't seen Contemporvent,
I'll put it in the show notes.
Put it in the show notes. But even that is 12 years old. Like, Contemporvent making fun of this contemporary movement that is no longer actually contemporary.
Well,
is also
and what
12 years old.
Contemporvent is pointing out 12 years ago with this YouTube video, which you should definitely watch. It's down in the description along with a link to Joshua Abraham's article, is that it was super formulaic 12 years ago.
Right.
And points out the deliberately emotional, manipulative beats in this. This is, there's like the song that will make you cry and buy my album in the bookstore, right? Like, it is shows the manipulation, even as comes from a church that does that and is kind of self-reflective. But that was 12 years ago, and it's only like that still remains one of the issues of the genre.
Yep.
And I think for me personally, this is where the podcast, I'm not joking when I said this is why I started podcasting.
Yeah.
Because I am always looking at this point in my career to how do we strip away, how do we boil this down to something that is genuine? How do we get there? Right? I'm often, even if I'm thinking about a worship with music, I'm like, cut the backing track, get rid of the drums, like unless it's a live drummer, like cut the backing track, like just play the guitar and sing. Like let's just get this down to like strumming, like let's get this stage picture down to 4 people. Like let's like cut it down. As a person in my 20s, I went to like Tazé, which is like, it's like 2,000 people singing along to like no instruments at all.
Yes.
Like, how do we, and podcasting lets this is just about another way of having hopefully podcasting is a good formula for producing at least somewhat genuine conversation.
Right. This is where Divine Provisions Co. is born out of, these sort of conversations where we're like, can we just talk about Jesus? Like, can we just talk about the faith in genuine ways so that people will listen in a format that people might actually listen to?
Right. That isn't reliant on, that is not devoid of emotion. No. That is also not reliant on just pulling the catharsis handle so hard your brain breaks.
Right.
And then hoping you'll sponsor a World Vision kid, and then inviting you down to an altar call.
Right. Buy our merch in the store on your way out. Right.
Yeah. Anyways, if you want to support this,
buy our merch on the way out. No.
No, if you have thoughts on all of this, I really am interested in all of it, because I don't necessarily know where this is all going, but I do know that this all for me personally, I'm in a real rough place of where, now that I've see through the matrix, or now that like all of this form has worn out its welcome and calcified and whatever, like, what do you think is next? I would love to know. divineprovisionsco@gmail.com. That is divineprovisionsco@gmail.com. We are not joking. We do actually need your support. Hopefully not in abusive ways, but like we do need your help to make this thing go. And so follow us at Divine Provisions Co. on most things, at Divine Provisions Co. on Instagram, at Divine Provisions Co. on YouTube, facebook.com/Divine Provisions Co. TikTok, it is Divine Provisions C. That is Divine Provisions and the letter C. We a whole bunch of our content kind of goes all over the place. You want an audio only version of the show? Great. Just search The Goodness of God and look for the thing with the cooler logo. You'll know what I mean when you see it in your podcatcher of choice. If you're interested in our other show, Cut the Crap, it does show up. We got an episode kind of like week and a half, 2 weeks away. So be on the lookout for that. That is a separate podcast feed, but is on all of our other channels as normal, all lumped in with everything else. We also, like, if you want to support us financially, you're welcome to. You do not need to text us at 7903. There's just a donate button on our website, divineprovisions.co. That is divineprovisions.co. Like, comment, subscribe, share, leave us 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. All that helps this stuff go further, and in that way make it more sustainable and hopefully get more people involved in these conversations. And go in peace to love and serve the Lord. We'll see you next time.